this is just unbelievable. We have so many people that need what you have, and we didn't know where to send them. And left and right, they're naming people that they're going to send. And they're looking at each other like, we finally know what to do with this person.
Hello and welcome to Dizzy World. Dizziness and vertigo are among the most common complaints in patients of all ages to their doctors, and yet there are still a limited number of specialists equipped to evaluate and treat these conditions. As a global leader in the science and business of equilibrium medicine, our goal is to empower healthcare providers from all specialties to help this important population of patients. On Dizzy World, we'll highlight outstanding clinicians, scientists, and business owners bringing excellent care to dizzy patients globally and living the AIB motto, dizziness and vertigo. You don't have to learn to live with it. All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to our very first inaugural podcast of our Dizzy Member Spotlight, where we outline and highlight our excellent centers of specialty care members that are providing world-class, gold standard neurodiagnostic and rehabilitative care to patients with dizziness, vertigo, and balance problems. Our very first guest of the show here is an outstanding member in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. We are very, very pleased to invite and welcome Madison Levine, HIS practice owner and public speaker, a Renaissance woman, if you will, to the show. Madison, thank you so much for joining with us and being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. This is so fun.
Yeah. So I want to start kind of these stories by just a little bit of getting to know you and your background of who you are and kind of that classic question of how did you come into audiology? What did your story look like that and what kind of parts of it made you who you are today and fed your success?
I think I have a story similar to many people where somebody in my life was already involved in audiology. Sometimes you hear that someone knew someone who had a hearing loss, a family member or a friend. So my mom had a hearing aid clinic down in Macon, Georgia, and I literally spent afternoons after school in the back of her office doing my homework and just kind of listening in, hearing what she was doing, and I got a front row seat to the power of better hearing. And I did not initially go right down that road career-wise. I took a pit stop. I studied viticulture and enology. I went into the winemaking world. Totally different career. And I did that early 20s kind of flail out thing where I said, oh my gosh, I hate this. What do I want to do? Reset. My husband's the one who pushed me to go look at what my mom was doing. And he's like, you guys have so much in common. This is a profession where you feel good. You're getting to help people. You're getting to use all of the sciences that you've already studied. You're getting to be a big part of your community, especially if you end up starting a business. So I took a zig and ended up founding my practice 7 years ago in Charlotte.
That's outstanding. It's really interesting. We speak a lot with practice owners and clinicians and physicians and physical therapists and people that get into healthcare and hearing science and hearing care in general, I think always sprinkled in the common denominator is they want to help people. And I think that's a foundational piece of what we want to do, not only looking at patients from a hearing perspective, but also those dealing with vertigo, dizziness, balance problems, and those concepts that we'll get to here in just a few minutes. So you take this fortunate zig and you kind of get into the hearing space, which is in your blood, we'll say. So what did that look like? What did the journey look like from deciding you wanted to get into this and help people with this problem and ending up as a practice owner and really running a really sophisticated, awesome business?
If you had asked me in high school what I really wanted to do, I knew I wanted to own a business. And I don't know that everybody has that story, but both my parents being entrepreneurs, I knew that someday that was something that I wanted. So even when I was going into training as an HIS in North Carolina, I did it with the knowledge that eventually I was going to have my own practice. And the person that sponsored me, that I studied under, I was hopeful that something might work out there where I might end up buying one or several of his locations ended up just going in another direction. And so 2015, I had been saving my pennies, and we just opened up a from scratch practice in South Charlotte. And it started out, I was wearing every hat. So I was answering the phones, I was greeting people in the waiting room, making them coffee, and then taking them back and testing their hearing. And it was just like a comedy show, basically. But those people that trusted me back then, they're still patients. And it's so fun for them to see the evolution of what's happened in the last 7 years. A lot of my growth came out of necessity. So 2015, opened the practice. 2017, had my first baby. Needed to find another provider to fill in for me. Kept her on full time. 2019, had another baby. I'm done having babies. So now I'm just full tilt growing the practice. And so at this point now we have 7 team members in the office. We moved this last summer from 1,200 square feet to 4,000. And we've got lots of big growth goals because Charlotte needs it. And there's just not enough people that are doing great work. And so here we are.
And I'm sure that, just to interject there for a second, I'm sure that, and I hear this with successful owners, that there's always this unique, this drive, this entrepreneurial spirit to be willing to spin all those plates. And I'm sure that serves you so well now that, to just use an analogy, you've learned how to play the flute. You knew how to play the cello, you knew how to play the trumpet, and now you're the one that's kind of conducting this entire symphony. So learning to kind of be in the weeds, or your origin story, if you will, I'm sure has contributed to how quickly you've been able to grow the practice and how much success and traction you guys have within that Charlotte market, which is growing like crazy. You know, all the stats that you read about Charlotte and the population, it's just fantastic what you guys have been able to do. What are some things, Madison, that throughout your years now of experience, personally and professionally, some of the core things that you've found that have made you successful? You know, what are the things that you've carried throughout your duration, and how do you feel that those have contributed to your success over the years?
You know, it took me some time to get through the hustle, which is what happens when you first start a business. You're committed and you're working, 16-hour days. There is no 8-hour day. But once I kind of got past that first hump, it was learning to do the things that only I could do. And how do I hire people that I consider to be even better than me at certain jobs? I've been seeing a little lighter patient load lately because I have so many hats to wear. And I just was telling a patient this week, I would love for you to see Dr. So-and-so in my practice. You're going to love her. She's smarter than me. She's better than me. That's why I hired her. You're going to have a fantastic time with her. And it feels so good to be able to have that handoff. So it is not easy to hire, but I think hiring is the most important thing you can do. And I would overpay people. I mean, I think people need to feel valued. And trying to get the cheapest labor possible, I think, is the biggest mistake that you can make in a business.
Yeah, you get what you pay for, right? And that's so unique. I mean, you read all of these business development gurus, your Maxwells and your Gladwells, and one of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs have is creating systems and delegating things. So that's so profound, and that's so cool. That's something that I've heard from a lot of successful business people, but typically later on in their life. It's so cool that you figured that out so early on. Really, really incredible. It's about the people that you surround yourself with. So I think that when we look at what makes a successful business or balanced practice, that's such an imperative part of the leadership, is understanding that you're only going to go as far as your hiring abilities and the employees that you surround yourself with. Absolutely. That's awesome. So on that note, what, before we kind of even get into the balance stuff that you guys have had a lot of great traction with, if I'm a patient in the Charlotte market, why choose you guys? What makes you unique? What about the patient experience and the care that you provide? Why would I send my mother to Levine Hearing versus someone else?
That's exactly what we've created, is where do I want to send my mother, right? And we all have had the healthcare experiences where we felt like we were just in a cattle call. We were pushed through the system. They were using the least amount of time possible and billing the most amount of codes. And you walk away, and sometimes you're not even sure what the resolution was for your problem. So I really just started building the business from the ground up, especially with it starting with just me. I could set the groundwork for what does my perfect patient experience look like. And I tell my team all the time, I'm very open with them. We talk about the marketing we're doing, the numbers we're hitting. We talk about everything. I want them to understand that, the piece of marketing that the person saw, that's our very first front door that they see. The next is them hitting the website or making the phone call. What is that impression? Then as they walk into the room, into the waiting room, I even had my team a couple weeks ago, we all walked out in the hallway and we each individually walked in to just notice, what do you see right as you walk in the door? Do we still have a price tag on a plant in the corner? Or, is the bathroom door ajar? Are there piles of papers in the back desk? We want to make sure that experience from their impression of the practice all the way through their actual care and their outcomes. We know as clinicians that we're going to hold ourselves to really high standards, but that whole thing affects the patient's outcome because their mood and their trust in you being a professional is going to have a huge psychological impact on whether they're going to be successful ultimately.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. People in healthcare, I think it starts with empathy. What type of medical office would I want to
Yeah.
walk into, and what type of experience do I want to have? We jokingly, one of our mantras is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that experience, we often, I think, misconstrue this in healthcare that it's just the doctor to patient or the specialist to patient. But it starts, you hit the nail on the head. It starts the second that they're introduced to your brand, starts that experience and that journey to website visit, to actual office visit. And perception is reality. And, we say with dizzy patients all the time that they want to feel like they're having an experience that's validated and that they're getting a test protocol that's validated. And the exact same thing goes whether you're an endocrinologist, a rheumatologist, a surgeon, that experience from a patient journey standpoint. And I think you start to learn that from, when you're a child and what your mother did and offices that I've been into. And that empathy piece in healthcare is so critical. So that's incredible to hear. So let's shift gears a little bit. Madison and I met probably, what is it, about 8 months ago now? 8 or 9 months ago, we first had a conversation about this idea of diversification of practice and providing services to a patient population that is desperately in need of this. Could you talk me through, before this was even a concept, how were you first introduced to the concept of vertigo, dizziness, and balance? And what was your journey look like for in that wheelhouse or that realm?
Well, my husband was having dizzy issues a couple years ago. And my background as an HIS, I had not had a lot of exposure to vestibular. Many of my team members who are audiologists have, and they had chosen to just work in hearing for the time being. But when my husband started having these vestibular issues, the first place I sent him was the more boutique-y ENT clinic near me. Their equipment was broken, and it was going to be 4 months to get some part from Germany. And so we sent him to the big behemoth ENT, which we were just trying to avoid. It's just kind of the cattle call kind of feel sometimes. They never called back with test results. He just got totally lost in the system. And so he still was left stuck at the end of these appointments, not knowing what to do next or what was wrong. And that's when he looked at me and he said, nobody is doing this well in Charlotte. Who is going to do it well? I think that you need to look at it. And so I started asking some of my mentors and people around me what their thoughts were. And they referred me directly to you, Joe. And I can't believe it's only been like 8 or 9 months. It feels like for us to have gotten to where we are today from where we started at that point, I mean, it feels like we've been doing this forever because I don't know, because we're established. It's
Yeah.
working really well.
Yeah, I remember, from the get-go, I can always tell because we work with a lot of physical therapists, physicians, audiologists, HIS, and one of the things I could tell immediately about you from the initial discovery call that we had was it's rooted, your motivation is so deeply rooted in wanting to help people, combined with that entrepreneurial spirit of there is a need. How do we fill that need? I remember how toxic that was and how excited we were to have you guys come on board. So that's awesome. And again, you guys have been an absolutely stellar example of not just AIB, but what we would like vestibular patients to have access to all over the world. And you guys do a stellar job. The biggest thing that we emphasize and that you guys have too is education, right? Educating referral sources, educating patients that they don't have to learn to live with this problem, and they don't have to go through the story that your husband went through. It's all too common. We all know the statistics. The average patient sees 4.5 doctors. They're nervous. They're scared. There's oftentimes some psychological comorbidities, anxieties, depression, loss of quality of life. So you guys have really, really adopted that, and it's been so incredible to see. And the patients of Charlotte are so fortunate to have you guys in that market. What has, to the community, from discussing this with physicians and with patients that are coming in to see you guys, walk me through a little bit, what has that meant to the patients of the Charlotte community and the doctors and you guys as a practice as a whole?
Well, I just got back from speaking to a group of doctors for lunch a few days ago, and I had 8 doctors in the room. They actually reached out to me to schedule that meeting, which was a really great feeling. It's always been a little tricky to get those meetings just talking about hearing, but as far as balance and dizziness went, they were looking for resources for their patients. So they came to me, I went and spoke to them. They would only let me come on a day where all 8 doctors were going to be in the room, which is amazing. Wow. And they basically, at the end, they were just in hysterics. People, I know that sounds crazy, but they were just laughing. They were like, this is just unbelievable. We have so many people that need what you have, and we didn't know where to send them. And left and right, they're naming people that they're going to send, and they're looking at each other like, we finally know what to do with this person. So many people have the need, and a lot of them, unfortunately, are circling back and back to their PCP, and the PCP is frustrated. They don't know how to help the person. So it feels really good to get that validation from the doctors that they're going to send people to us, that they value what we're doing, and that we're going to actually get some resolution for their patients.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And with the patient experiences that you guys have had thus far, which there have been a lot of them, what are some of the coolest stories? If you wouldn't mind sharing, somebody that's come in that's been in this loop, this referral carousel, I call it, and this, looking for answers. What are some of the most profound, if you have an example or two to share about a patient that maybe left a good review or was real happy with you guys?
Well, there have been so many so far, which is amazing. I think for me, one of the most impactful things, I think, is when we can help somebody on the same day. So when I've had people who they've got a flight out tomorrow for their daughter's wedding, and they've gotten hit with BPPV, and they don't know where to go. Their primary care is not going to do it. They can't get an appointment at an urgent care. They probably don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do the treatment. And we're able to scoot them in and get them feeling better so that they can go back to life and not miss huge life moments. I mean, that is one example. But we're just seeing the relief that people feel when they get the validation. You used that word earlier, and I think that's one of the most important words you can use in relation to this. Because people are tired. They're sick and tired of dealing with a symptom and calling it a diagnosis. and I've just lived with vertigo. It hits me once a month. It's been such a problem my whole life. I have vertigo. Well, what do you really have? Has anybody really figured it out? If you've just been living with it for the last 5, 10 years, whatever, don't give up. Come see us. Let's try to get to the root of it so that we can manage that symptom if we know what the cause is.
Yeah. And validation's a huge word. I've done this care, and I've seen, thousands and thousands of patients. And one of the most profound things you notice is that just by listening and just by letting them know that you will turn over every single leaf possible. And I know one of the really cool things I've seen about some of your media initiatives and things is this concept of Madison Listens. So perfect, because these people want to be listened to, they want to be validated, and they want to know that you haven't just heard, oh, you're dizzy, try this medication. It might be something in your blood pressure. It might be a problem that we can address with meclizine. Maybe physical therapy will. I don't think that physicians or practitioners that are giving that level of medical advice or recommendations really understand how frustrating that is from a patient perspective. I've had patients in tears in the first 5 minutes that they walk in, because it's like, you didn't just sit behind a notebook and tell, oh, another dizzy, maybe try this, because you're really listening and giving them that level of validation. So really, really cool to hear that. I've heard you, Madison, now with all the media outreach that you're doing, you really, and for being on board with us for 8 months, you have truly become like an expert, or at least the way that you speak about it with the authenticity. What was the learning curve like? Did you read up on this? Obviously you took different courses in continuing ed, but could you walk me through a little bit of, how does a primarily background of hearing care, how do you kind of shift your focus and really dive into this vestibular stuff so that you can adequately speak to physicians? You're in a room with 8 doctors and on news platforms and things. What's that journey been like for you to refocus in that element?
You know what? I think I was just ready to learn. You know how you go through school and you're in learning mode, and then maybe you get out of school and you're just practicing? I was definitely at a crossroads where I was ready to challenge myself and the team. Yeah. And there was this great need. And so I did throw myself into it. So I ordered several big textbooks on Amazon, kind of all the gold, the oldie goldies that you're supposed to read, probably things that, audiologists, they've done whole semesters on these courses, and I didn't have that benefit. But like I said before, I've brought great teammates into the fold who have very strong vestibular backgrounds already. So I felt like I needed to come up the curve so that I could speak that language with them and not just leave them to it. Good luck, you guys. Sure. But yeah. I trust them that they can take the baton. I can take it so far. I can do, I think, a good job speaking with physicians and the media, like you said. But then as far as really getting into the intricacies of patient care, I trust that they're going to be able to go on the deeper dive for those patients.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at, all the successes that you've had in the short 8 months that you've been offering these services and helping these patients, what do you see as some of the biggest hurdles that you've run into? People out there, there's a lot of reasons that audiologists or physicians, like you said, broken equipment in an ENT office, it's not a viable source of revenue for a practice. You can't help these people. There's nothing you can do. What are some of the objectives or barriers or some of the most challenging things that you've found with adding this line of service?
Well, what you just said, it's so interesting. The line of thought, I've been at several conferences this year, and when I tell people we've added vestibular, they just kind of look at me like they're sorry for me. I think there's this general consensus that you can't make money at it, and that you can't really get resolution for people and actually help them. I think there's just misconceptions that you're just testing people. You're not getting enough reimbursement, and then they don't get fixed. And I have not had that experience at all. I think the way that you build the engine is going to be the roadmap for whether you're going to be successful at it or not. We jumped in with 2 feet. So
Yeah.
I was not going to putz around at it. If I was going to make this investment in moving into adding these services, I was going to have everything lined up from the first day that we could see patients. I wanted a full schedule. And so I got all my ducks in a row. And it was everything from informing current patients, multifaceted approach for that, everything from mailers to newsletters to in-office marketing. It was informing the media, taking all of the layered marketing that we already do and folding it into that marketing, into all of those campaigns. And then it was physicians. How do they know that they can send people to you now? They don't have to go to the big ENT anymore, which they just breathe a sigh of relief. They're so happy that they have an alternative choice for their patients. So
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. What I've always found in my practice and now helping other practices do this is the profoundness of something as simple as asking your existing patients about these complaint profiles. People are coming into and out of our doors as audiologists and hearing instrument specialists all the time. But unless you ask the right questions, they're so confused or under this veil of thinking that, oh, I just get dizzy when I lay down. Or, oh, when I move my head, I just get dizzy, so I don't do that. Unless the questions are asked appropriately, they may not know, because of the way the world has historically viewed these types of complaints, that there is help. And then building on those same concepts of what's already in my office, who can I help that I'm seeing for other things right now? And then building upon that, how can I now educate other physicians or practitioners of who we can help from them? So that's really awesome that, again, in that Charlotte market, it was so desperate for these types of services. And it's so cool to see you guys having the success that you are. And I do remember from those first couple of calls we had, you were like, Joe, I'm doing this. I'm going to do it right. I don't go halfway of anything in my life. If I'm going to help these patients, I'm going to do it. Let's figure out what this looks like and let's rock this. And, the rest has kind of been history. So that's incredible. When you look, Madison, at the field of audiology, and given, your mother's history and all these kind of things, and a lot of us, we talk at these conferences about what the direction of the field is going to be, what's next. If we have this if patients are going to be able to receive over-the-counter hearing health care, and there's all these other, disruptors and these kind of things, where do you see in the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think your practice looks like, and how is it different from the way that it was maybe 5 years ago now? And then what does the next 5 years kind of look like?
Gosh, it hasn't changed since 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had 2 providers and we were basically only doing hearing aids. And today we really have a 4-prong approach, everything from hearing, tinnitus treatment, vestibular, and you wouldn't believe it, but wax removal is its own pillar. And I think that we're moving in the direction, I think the industry is moving the same way we've known it was always moving. And that is putting less pressure on the widget and putting much more attention onto the abilities of the provider to help that patient in all the facets of all the services that we can offer to them. I think that you should, like I said earlier, you should do the things that only you can do, and you should operate at the full extent of your licensing, whatever that is. And I think if you leave things on the table and you don't operate to the full extent, then I think as a profession, you're really leaving yourself vulnerable for other professions to just pick up that responsibility and run with it. And we've seen that, no offense to anybody, but with SLPs and other professionals who have said, oh, maybe I should be doing that. Who should be doing oral rehab? Who should? And if you don't take that responsibility and hold it within your scope, then others are going to take it and you're going to see your scope keep shrinking. That's what I think.
Yeah. Plant your flag. Yeah. And it's really cool because I talk to, I do a lot of student outreach. Obviously, AIB is heavily involved in
Yeah.
audiology students, and a lot of concern throughout the industry of is the profession dying? What's next for us if not this widget? And it's so cool. I mean, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on our first episode today is the cream will always rise to the top. Innovators and people that are really good and have this really strong foundation and are willing to operate in a competitive market and plant your flags and things and offer the more medical model of audiology are absolutely going to continue to be
Agree.
superstars. And I tell members this all the time, that if you're a hearing aid dispenser and you're tied to just doing that, you are the band on
Yeah.
the Titanic, putting on your bow tie and getting ready to go down with the ship. But it's so encouraging. I think it's so important that we as a profession continue to highlight folks like you and look at how we can continue to push the ceiling of the scope with cognition and balance and a medical model where the hearing aid is simply the supplement to that. It's part of the treatment plans and the plans of care and these different kind of things that we're
Agreed.
developing.
Absolutely. What you just touched on, if anybody should be nervous about OTCs, it is the retail churn and burn hearing aid clinics, because they have not provided a ton of value outside of the widget. And I don't know how they're going to explain it as the patient population starts asking more and more questions. What value are you giving me besides this device? If they weren't doing it before,
Yeah.
it's not going to start now.
Yep. And speaking of devices, have you any thoughts or have you noticed how the offering, expanding your lines of service into balance, what has that meant for traction coming through your door in terms of helping people with hearing loss? Has that helped amplify and grow that leg of the business as well? Have you found any overlap? What are
There
your
has
thoughts on
been
that?
some overlap. Certainly, the people who have the most vestibular issues also tend to have hearing loss. We've got age demographics that overlap with each other. I think, interestingly, from my launch point, many of my current patients who already have hearing aids have crossed over to become vestibular patients. And as we're gaining traction in our community and with physicians, I think we're going to see even greater numbers of the vestibular crossing to hearing. We've had plenty, but I think that those percentages are going to keep going up. I will say that people that are coming to us directly for a vestibular problem, they definitely want to tackle that first. So when we tell them that they have a hearing loss, they are going to say, great, and help me not feel dizzy right now. Don't care. I'm not ready to deal with it. And I think that's where having really great drip campaigns within your practice for how you're going to continue outreach to those people, just like you would to a patient that has come in for hearing loss and hasn't gotten hearing aids. It's the same thing with that vestibular patient. If they haven't gotten hearing aids yet, how do you keep them in the fold to just let them know you're still there for them and be ready for them at the point that they're ready to move forward?
Yeah, and it goes back to creating the experience. Someone comes in and you give them an excellent 5-star experience, whether it's again in an ENT office and you help them fix their nose problem, or they're more likely to come back to you with these other problems that are also under your scope and your sphere of influence. That's incredible. Lastly, just really quickly, so up to this point, are most of the patients that you're helping with dizziness and balance problems, what is the split like, just ballpark? Are you seeing more folks that come in direct to you? In other words, that are calling you and then you're working with them and their physicians to get them in? Or are you seeing mainly physician referral? And how is that tip of balance and how is that scale working out for you guys?
Joe, do you want to know the truth? We're 98% off the street right now, not from
Direct.
physicians. And I'm going to keep working towards physician referrals, of course, but we already had really good marketing campaigns, and then we already were doing great marketing with our current patients and then referrals from current patients. So that has been the majority of our growth and our consistency, but I see that being a big shift as we go into the beginning of the next year. I am sure that we will have reached our patient base more so, and we'll be moving into better traction in the community too.
Yeah, and also speaks volumes to hats off if those of you tuning in don't know Madison or her website or the way that her brand is presented. It speaks volumes to that you're able to touch and reach that the patient volume that you are just based off of right now, again, 90% of just direct patients. So that's incredible. So I think just to wrap up, if you are a patient in the Charlotte market, if you are an audiologist in the AIB network, I want to encourage patients to go visit Madison, and I want to encourage existing AIB members out there to be more like Madison, because she is doing an absolutely incredible job. Again, at its basis, strip away a lot of the other concepts and stuff that we've discussed. She's helping people with this really, really tough to deal with problem. And I would venture to guess that everyone listening here either has themselves or has a loved one that has dealt with dizziness, vertigo, or balance problems. So again, if you're an audiologist tuning in and you're new to this concept of vestibular, something to consider as you look at what the next 5 to 10 years of your practice look like. Because let's be honest with ourselves, Madison, you and I both know the number one complaint of the older adult, the fastest growing segment of the population, is dizziness and balance problems. And that part of the population is not shrinking. Fall risk, all these concepts that us as a profession and us as practice owners, business entrepreneurials, all these kind of things, we absolutely have to consider that. So I want to just thank you sincerely for joining us today. Again, this is kind of our inaugural podcast here, and I can't think of a better member to start with than you. So thanks so much, Madison.
Thank you for having me, Joe. This has been really fun.
Yeah, really appreciate your time, and I'm glad that your children were able to stay sleeping long enough.
Just barely long enough.
I might have spoken too soon. Yeah. So thanks again so much, Madison. Really appreciate your time. And for those of you that are interested in looking a little bit more about Madison, we'll have a link below to click that'll take you to our website. And we would encourage you, again, all of you, to think about what it might mean to your practice and your community to do more for these patients. Thanks, Madison, and we'll talk soon.